Forge Master of Fuses. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 401 Processing. Field ignored this group of people, and Major General Song Si certainly could not show mercy. Tang Fan and Miss Tao Kingxi, who were addicted to the experiment and could not extricate themselves, could not be relied on. Therefore, Yasin Bonyu and others lay on the ground for a night until they woke up and took the medicine they had saved with great difficulty, and then they saved their lives. But when Yasin Bonyu looked up and saw Major General Song Si with his arms around his chest, but did not see Field, Yasin Bonyu knew that he had not only become the chicken that Song Si killed the chicken to scare the monkey, but also been abandoned by Field. Yasin Bonyu, who finally woke up, had a black eye and fainted again. Song Si sneered, picked up the full bucket beside him, and poured it directly at Yasin Bonyu. I don't know where Song Si found the water, with a strong fishy smell, which directly woke Yasin Bonyu up. When Yasin Bonyu woke up again, there was only despair in his eyes. Seeing Yasin Bonyu's desperate eyes, Major General Song Si smiled with satisfaction. You should know a common sense, after any animal dies, it will accelerate corruption and produce a large number of bacteria. 3-year-old children know that everyone has the responsibility to protect the environment, and they should clean up the garbage they create themselves. I believe that everyone present, who has lived for most of their lives, should know this truth better. Song Si's eyes slowly swept over the people on the ground, and he continued slowly, you were unconscious just now, and I couldn't force you. Now that everyone is awake, let's take action. As he said that, Song Si did not forget to make a standard please gesture towards the entrance of the passage they had just left. Yasin Bonyu stared at Song Si fiercely for a long time, and Song Si did not dodge or evade, but looked back at him with a smile. In the end, Yasin Bonyu was defeated and led his brothers on the ground to the basement unwillingly to clean up the mess. Song Si and the group of people behind him just watched quietly, without any intention of helping, but were even picky. However, there are kind people on such a large experimental star. At least, Miss Tao Kingxi rushed over after learning about this situation. This lady with a strong experimental spirit did not come to help. As a genetic researcher, Miss Tao Kingxi's 3 views are not as twisted as Jim Field and others, who use living people for experiments. But facing the dead research materials delivered to her door, Miss Tao Kingxi has no reason to give up. This woman who is not good at fighting not only came by herself, but also almost moved the entire laboratory here. She selectively conducted a comparative and detailed study on the experimental subjects in the 18 districts in the north. It was not until the research materials at hand underwent various qualitative changes and were no longer suitable for research that the lady left with regret. Seeing Miss Tao Kingxi leave the basement, Yasin Bonyu and others breathed a sigh of relief. That expression was almost like sending away the plague god. There was no way. Miss Tao Kingxi's sharp knife skills and her attitude of not treating corpses as corpses in research had caused them too much psychological trauma to be calculated. They would never be able to look directly at the profession of pharmacist in their lifetime. Especially a pharmacist who studies genes. Chapter 402. Because the research had finally come to an end, Tang Fan, who had just walked out of the room, saw everyone avoiding Miss Tao Kingxi and was full of curiosity. She was not very familiar with other people, so she grabbed Major General Song Si and asked him. Although it had been a long time, Song Si couldn't help but feel a chill on his back when he thought about the situation at that time. He didn't say anything, but just sent a video to Tang Fan. Tang Fan clicked it in confusion, and only watched a small part before he understood. She turned off the video and patted Song Si on the shoulder. Thank you for your hard work. Major General Song Si smiled bitterly and didn't deny it. One thing after another scared him so much that he didn't dare to go back to the room and live directly in the command center. The number of on-duty personnel also increased from 1 to 2, just in case something happened and he didn't have time to deal with it in time. The key is that there are still people who don't understand his work. Song Si glanced at the confinement of Field and couldn't help rubbing his temples. It's too hard. Tang Fan glanced along his gaze and couldn't help but sigh. It's not terrible to have 2 opinions in a team. What's terrible is that you are fighting bloody battles in the front, and you have to be on guard against someone stabbing you in the back, Major General Song Si nodded with a wry smile. Yes. Tang Fan took out a nutrient from the space buckle slowly, held it in his mouth, and said with a smile, then why don't you throw this kind of problem to the other party? When Song Si heard this, his eyes lit up. Your words are interesting. Let me think about it carefully. Tang Fan smiled and pointed in the direction where Zhao Jin and Solomon Burke left, and the smile on Major General Song Si's face became a little thicker. Not long after, Major General Song Si, who had figured out many links, went to find Mr. Emelfield for a long talk. Tang Fan, who had eaten and drunk enough, took advantage of the time when the two of them talked and returned to the room again to catch up on his sleep. I don't know what Song Si talked about with Emelfield. When Tang Fan walked out of the room, Emelfield had already led his men to chase in the direction where Zhao Jin and Solomon Burke left. Tang Fan couldn't help but give Major General Song Si a thumbs up. After all, it's not easy to do something like jumping into a trap when others know it's a trap. Song Si, who perfectly transferred his pressure to others, was not polite at all and accepted the praise from Miss Tang Fan with a smile. In order to thank Miss Tang Fan for her enlightenment, Major General Song Si stuffed a few candies in his space buckle into her. Candies that can be seen everywhere in the Alliance have become rare treasures in this place where no one is doing shit. Miss Tang Fan, who has seen a lot, was so happy that she couldn't wait to peel one and throw it into her mouth. At the same time, she didn't forget to peel one for Major General Song Si as well. Looking at the candy on the little girl's fingertips, Major General Song Si was stunned for 3 seconds before carefully putting it into his mouth. At the moment when his lips and fingertips touched, Major General Song Si clearly felt his heartbeat and missed a few beats. Song Tong, who was guarding the command center instead of Song Si, looked at this harmonious scene with a kind, doting, loving, and gratified, smile on his lips. Chapter 403, Poor. A piece of candy, sweet from the tip of the tongue to the tip of the heart. A man who eats someone's food will be grateful, and a man who takes someone's money will be soft-handed. Miss Tang Fan suddenly felt that some things were better not to be investigated in depth. So, after quietly handing out the candy, Miss Tang Fan put her hands in her pockets, said hello to Song Si, and went back to her room to catch up on her sleep. Looking at the chick back of the little girl, Major General Song, who had the candy in his mouth, had something flashing in his eyes. No matter how reluctant he was, the candy in his mouth could not be kept and melted in his mouth. After the pure sweetness disappeared, a slight bitter taste suddenly surged into his heart. It was obviously not very obvious, but Song Si drank a large bottle of drinking water, but he couldn't suppress the bitterness. Song Tong, a classmate in the monitoring center, was so happy and overjoyed when he saw Major General Song Si being defeated. If conditions did not allow it, she could have recorded this scene and sent it to the Expeditionary Army and Ms. Yao. Such a wonderful picture. Of course, it is better to share the joy with others than to enjoy it alone. As for what will happen after Song Si finds out, Song Tong is not afraid. After all, Marshal Song Yuanqi and Ms. Yao are not just decorations. Even if these two big guys are not powerful, Xia Adao should be able to block them for her. Based on this principle, Song Tong not only copied some of the pictures she thought were classics to her optical computer, she also specially edited them and added BGM. If conditions did not allow, she would even want to add a little special effects. Editing the video was too happy, so happy that Song Tong could not stop at all. So much so that Major General Song Si walked into the command center, but could not stop Song Tong's creative enthusiasm. Fortunately, Song Si did not pay too much attention to her, but cast his eyes on the small screen that had just been set up in the command center to monitor Emelfield and others. Just as Song Si was wary of Emelfield, Emelfield was also always wary of Song Si. Song Si gave Emelfield 4 video recording devices, but Emelfield only used 1. And the angle of this only video recording device was very strange. If it weren't for the whistling wind and the subtle difference in the nebula in the distance, Song Si even began to doubt that it was just a still picture in front of him. But just this one shot, Major General Song Si kept staring at it, motionless. Song Tong finally edited the video and saw this picture. She came over, touched Song Si's elbow, and asked curiously, "It's just such a picture, what's so good about it?" Song Si raised his eyebrows and didn't say anything, but the glasses next to him spoke. Although this picture doesn't provide much information, it is not completely useless. Through the sound of the wind, we can clearly calculate the speed of the mecha driving. Knowing the distance between the experimental star and the destination, and knowing the speed of the mecha driving, we can accurately locate Field and his position. Song Tong looked at the glasses who were calmly analyzing, and then looked at Song Si, and felt his hair stand on end. You are exaggerating too much, Major General Song Si waved his hands. Don't be too surprised. These are all basic operations of a data analyst. Song Tong's mouth twitched. I began to sympathize with the girls you guys like from the bottom of my heart. When I thought about how they would be stared at and analyzed by you guys in such a 360-degree manner, I felt sorry for them from the bottom of my heart. Song Tong's heartfelt words successfully changed Song Si and Glass's expressions. Chapter 404, Bad? What the hell is Song Tong saying? What do you mean I start to sympathize with a girl you like from the bottom of my heart? Could it be that just because they have the possibility of bringing professional habits into life, they are not allowed to fall in love? I sympathize with your pharmacist's partner? Dazzling, get up and take medicine is the nightmare of many men. It's much more terrifying than being stared at and analyzed from all angles, okay? It's hard to say who is more pitiful. However, the two men who just saw the performance of the female pharmacist Miss Tao Kingxi did not have the courage to say what was in their hearts. When they were angry, they could only say, "Don't worry, I won't stare at you and analyze you from all angles." Song Tong glanced at Song Si and sneered, "You have to save your energy to analyze our Miss Tang Fan." I understand. The amount of information in this sentence was a bit too much, and the brain with glasses running at high speed almost crashed on the spot. If the girl that the data analyst likes will be stared at and analyzed from 360 degrees without blind spots, plus I won't stare at and analyze you from 360 degrees without blind spots equals Major General Song has no feelings for Song Tong. Then, the girl that the data analyst likes will be stared at and analyzed from 360 degrees without blind spots, plus you have to save your energy to analyze our Miss Tang Fan equals. In addition, Major General Song did not deny it. Yan Jing felt as if he knew some incredible secret. He rubbed his hands nervously and began to calculate the possibility of being silenced by Major General Song. Analyzing various possibilities all the time is an occupational disease of data analysts, and it can't be changed in a short time. The two people he analyzed stared at each other, and the same line of words was written on their faces that had no similarity at all. Come on. Hurt each other. Childish? It's really childish. But does he dare to say what's in his heart? Impossible, not in this lifetime. Complaining is impossible, so he can only change the subject. After scanning the surroundings, when Glass's eyes once again fell on the small screen monitoring Field and others, the narrow and long phoenix eyes instantly doubled in size. That was undisguised fear. Before he could say anything, Glass's body had already taken action and pressed the alarm of the command center. The sharp alarm successfully aroused the attention of Song Si and Song Tong. They glanced at Glasses at the same time, and then turned to the screen that Glasses was staring at. The 4 video recording devices that Song Si gave to Field were all turned on at this moment. The originally mysterious perspective also turned into a 360-degree realistic style without blind spots. The 3 people standing in front of the screen could clearly see the battle far away from hundreds of thousands of light years. On one side was the familiar mecha formation led by Field. On the other side were the mutant creatures that covered the sky. The appearance of this group of mutant creatures was similar to that of sheath beetles, but their elytra were particularly developed. Through the frequency of their flapping elytra, Glasses concluded that their flying speed was not inferior to that of the mecha. Glasses also estimated their starting point through their flying speed. But none of this mattered. What mattered was that Field and his companions did not have the courage to fight against this group of mutant creatures. At the moment they met on a narrow road, they did not set up their weapons to fight the enemy, but chose to turn on the video equipment and run towards the experimental planet while filming. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 405 approaching. Although he knew that Field was not a good person, Song Si was still so angry that he clenched his fists and his veins bulged when he saw his amazing actions. If Field stood in front of Song Si at this moment, Major General Song Si's clenched fist would definitely fall on him. Unfortunately, Field was too far away, and Major General Song Si could not reach him. He could only swallow his anger and wait for the autumn. No, after the mutants were eliminated, he would settle the score. The rapid alarm successfully summoned all the people on the experimental star. In less than 3 minutes, the command center, which was originally quite spacious, was crowded with people entering in a line. Song Si didn't need to say much. Just a glance at the small screen in front of him, everyone understood everything. Born on the land of the Alliance and influenced by the core values of the Alliance since childhood, the expeditionary forces showed strong contempt for Emil Field's behavior. Even Miss Tao Kingxi, who is related to Emil Field, stared at the screen so hard that she wanted to stare a hole in it. Only Miss Tang Fan was calm as she watched the scene. This mutant creature is different from the ones we encountered before. Tang Fan's calm voice attracted everyone's attention. Song Si also slightly shifted his gaze from the small screen to Tang Fan. Except for their flying speed, we know nothing about this mutant creature. Judging from their appearance, they seem to be somewhat similar to the sheath beetles. So, I plan to try the method I used to deal with the sheath beetles. Song Si said the last few words very softly. But in Tang Fan's ears, they sounded so heavy that it made him breathless. The battlefield is cruel. So what's there to try? Some are just fighting for life. Looking at the fleeing Emil Field and others, and the dense mutant creatures behind them, Tang Fan took a deep breath. If you really want to try, let me start. This sentence attracted everyone's attention, and even Song Si gave up staring at the screen, looking at Tang Fan and frowning. Are you crazy? Do you know what you are talking about? Tang Fan nodded seriously. I know that the first battle with the mutants is crucial. However, everyone's life is more important. Although I don't know the manufacturing principle and materials of the beast-type mecha, I always feel that it will have more advantages than ordinary mechas in fighting mutants. And I am the only one who can control the beast-type mecha. Tang Fan's words successfully made Song Si fall into a struggle between emotion and reason. Emotion and reason turned into two villains, pulling in Song Si's heart. Reason told him that Tang Fan was not wrong. But his feelings told him that he couldn't take risks with his little girl. Just when Song Si was entangled, Miss Tao Kingxi took the initiative to stand up and whispered, "You don't have to be so troublesome." A simple sentence made everyone's attention shift to Miss Tao Kingxi. Facing everyone's gaze, Tao Kingxi couldn't help but get a little nervous. She clenched her fist, put it against her lips and coughed softly, barely concealing her discomfort, and then said, "If those mutated creatures really have the same biological characteristics as the sheath beetles, then the new drugs in the laboratory should work on them." Song Si couldn't help but cast his eyes on Song Tong, who is also a pharmacist. Chapter 406 Toys. Song Tong is not only a pharmacist, but also a pharmacist who has seen all the physical data of Tang Mangan and Tao Kingxi, and watched the whole process of Miss Tao Kingxi's experiment. Song Tong's opinion is definitely more pertinent than anyone else. However, Song Tong nodded without hesitation and confirmed the feasibility of Tao Kingxi's proposal. Ms. Tao, prepare the medicine, and Off and prepare the drone. While they are still some distance away from us, we will send the drone to try it first. Tao Kingxi and Tang Fan looked at each other and immediately took action. Without Tang Fan's distraction, Song Si's brain speed immediately increased a lot. 4 alternative plans quickly took shape in his mind, turned into instructions, and were arranged. When Tao Kingxi and Tang Fan were ready, the command room became empty again because everyone left with their respective tasks. The arrival of the two ladies made the command center more popular, and also made Major General Song Si, who was staring at the screen, feel a little relieved. He patted the shoulders of Glasses, and Glasses consciously accompanied Tang Fan and Tao Kingxi to the door. The reason why Song Si arranged for Glasses to come here was not to give Tang Fan and Tao Kingxi courage, nor to protect the safety of the two ladies, but to determine the target direction for the two young ladies from the perspective of a professional data analyst. The drone carried the medicine, and under the control of Tang Fan, it flew at the fastest speed in the direction specified by Glasses. A few hours later, in the space not far away, they met Emil Field and others, as well as the army of mutant creatures behind them. With the order of Glasses, Tang Fan gently clicked the button on the controller. Accompanied by a faint scent of mandala flowers, a thick fog gushed out from under the drone. The white thick fog immediately solidified when it encountered the cold air, turning into white water droplets, and evenly fell on the objects below. Emil Field and others and the mutant creatures were all wetted by the rain, and none of them fell. Unfortunately, the drone can only carry a limited amount of medicine, And this precipitation only lasted for a short 3 minutes. But these short 3 minutes fully proved the speculation of Miss Tao Qingxi and Song Tong. The mutants that were chasing Field and the others gradually slowed down after coming into contact with a batch of drugs. There were even a few mutants that stopped moving, letting their elytra carry them to glide endlessly. Field and the others were not dead. The experimental star could feel the abnormality of the mutants, so how could they not feel it? Field looked at the experimental star not far away, thought about what Song Si said to him, and looked at the lazy mutants under the thick fog, and finally stopped running. The group of people raised their knives again. However, the target became the mutants. Major General Song Si looked at the one-sided picture on the screen, and couldn't help but curl up a sneer at the corner of his mouth. Song Tong on the side couldn't help but complain, "What the hell is this? A dragon gives birth to a dragon, a phoenix gives birth to a phoenix, and a mouse's son can dig holes. What good can Jim Field's offspring be?" This made sense. Song Tong was speechless and had to change the subject. "So what do we do next?" Song Si tapped his palms and said with a smile, "Of course, wait. Waiting for the next wave of mutant creatures. Or, Field and the other party will meet on a narrow road." Chapter 407 Release. Unexpectedly, the first people they waited for were Field and others who had just experienced a fierce battle and needed to rest. Most noble sons of noble families still have some dignity. Field is no exception. They turned off the extra video equipment and once again presented a mysterious perspective. However, both sides knew exactly where they were and what they had done. It was just that they saw through it but did not say it. Fortunately, Field, who returned to the experimental planet, was embarrassed to appear in front of Song Si and others. He just rested for a day, used the corpses of mutant creatures to extract a batch of nutrients, and then set out on the journey again. Because of this batch of unexpected mutant creatures, the target was much clearer. Even without the guidance of Song Si and Yanjing and others, Field and others could find the general direction. Seeing that they were finally rushing towards the target, Major General Song Si couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. But before he could let go of the heart in his throat, he saw that the group of people stopped at the place where they encountered the mutant creatures. The next second, a group of people took 3 steps and moved slightly obscenely, which successfully irritated Song Si's glasses and made Major General Song Si, who had a very high sense of humor, laugh. However, at this critical moment when communication was extremely underdeveloped and manpower was extremely scarce, what could Major General Song do? Of course, endure it. After all, from another perspective, the behavior of Field and others can also be called cautious. Major General Song Si waited for 3 days, but he didn't wait for the next wave of mutants, nor did he wait for Field to meet the other party on a narrow road. Instead, he waited so long that he became angry and had acne. Because Field and his group only walked 1/7 of the distance in 3 days. Their negative attitude of sabotage was too obvious, and they were just short of writing the 4 words "if you don't agree, you come" on their faces. But Major General Song Si really had no way to deal with this group of people. The most important thing is that the few medicinal materials in the laboratory were almost zero due to the hard work of Miss Tao Qingxi. Thinking about the experimental subjects who had to consume a lot of medicinal materials every day, and the mutant creatures that needed medicine to deal with, Major General Song Si's face wrinkled like a cosmos. On the 4th day after Field and others set out again, Major General Song Si organized all the people, held a short meeting, and announced that they would abandon the experimental planet and migrate to the most habitable planet in front, which was 90% blue, full of oceans, and only 1 piece of land. The people under Song Si's command completed their tasks quickly and accurately, just like every previous migration. The only difference was that the person who was at the back became Major General Song Si. Before he left this sin-ridden planet, he made an incredible decision. He pressed all the organs in the command center and released the experimental subjects in all areas of the 4 parts of the basement, southeast, northwest, and northeast. No one can decide the life and death of others casually. Song Si, can't either. He has no right and no excuse to lock them in a cage that doesn't belong to them. Let them be free. Just like releasing birds back to the mountains and forests, and releasing fish back to the ocean. From then on, natural selection. From then on, no one would disturb them. Perhaps, this was their best fate. This was also the last and only thing he could do for them. Chapter 408 Missing Person Notice. Song Si finally finished all this, and when he turned his head, he saw Tang Fan hovering in the air. Even though there were 2 layers of mechas between them, Song Si could feel Tang Fan's half-smiley eyes. Awkward. Awkward in capital letters. Are you waiting for me? Silence. Deathly silence. Then, Miss Tang Fan, who didn't know how to answer, ran away without saying a word. Song Si watched Tang Fan run away, stunned for a full half-minute, and then chased after him with a smile. Although the process was a little tortuous, the 2 of them still caught up with the main force one after the other and arrived at post-Saturn. Ms. Tao Kingxi keenly discovered that the 2 people responsible for the rear were a little different from when they left. But if she really had to explain it, she didn't know where to start. In fact, Ms. Tao Kingxi's magical intuition was quite accurate. Miss Tang Fan, who ran away inexplicably because of Song Si's words, has been avoiding Song Si recently. Major General Song Si was not unaware, but he had just moved to a new station, and he had to make decisions on all matters, so he had no time to argue with Tang Fan, so he let her go. But when the station was basically sorted out and everyone finally sorted out the things in hand, Song Si smiled and blocked Miss Tang Fan in the grove. Master Tang, long time no see. The moment Song Si's low voice sounded, Tang Fan was like being struck by lightning and froze in place. After a while, he slowly turned around and said, Major General Song, long time no see, looking at the little girl in front of him who wanted to bury her head in his chest, leaving only the top of her head for him. Song Si couldn't help but touch his back teeth. This is the first time we've met since we both landed on Saturn. It feels like a long time since we last met. I really miss my sister, Ah Fan. It's a rare chance for us to meet. Let's chat. Tang Fan nodded with a fake smile. Okay. What does Major General Song want to talk about? Song Si raised an eyebrow. How about we talk about not seeing each other for a long time? Logically speaking, Saturn is so small, you can't meet anyone for a few days. Tang Fan laughed dryly. Major General Song, you are so busy, how can you pay attention to a small person like me? Maybe we met, but Major General Song didn't notice it. Song Si raised an eyebrow. Oh. Really? Tang Fan nodded. If Song Si hadn't been paying attention to this girl all the time, she might have believed it with her extremely sure look. Sister Effin should have reminded me too. He rubbed Tang Fan's head, poked his back teeth, and sneered, we are a family after all. We can't ignore Sister Effin because of such trivial matters, right? How does that saying go? No matter how busy you are, you have to spend time with your family. Tang Fan couldn't help but twitch his mouth. Her last name is Tang, and his last name is Song. How can they be considered a family? Where is Ms. Yao? Isn't he quite against Ms. Yao's random adoption of godchildren? Just when he was about to say something, he saw Song Si speaking again. Next time you meet, Sister Effin must say hello to me. If you don't meet again in these few days, I will have to post a missing person notice. What the hell is a missing person notice? Tang Fan's words of refusal were on the tip of his tongue, but he was forced to hold them back because of Song Si's words. Threat. A blatant threat. But Tang Fan really didn't dare to ignore it. She knew that this guy was really capable of doing such a thing. Chapter 409, Falling in Love? With Song Si's influence, let alone posting a missing person notice, even if she just shouted and asked where Tang Fan had gone, she would be the center of attention. Tang Fan was a person who cared about her reputation. This scene was too beautiful, she simply couldn't imagine it. She didn't dare to continue avoiding Song Si, not in her lifetime. However, the little girl didn't take the words "I haven't seen you for a long time, I miss you so much" to heart. Once a teacher, a father for life. From the moment Song Si stood in front of Tang Fan as an instructor, Tang Fan consciously put Song Si in the position of an elder. Even though because of Ms. Yao, Song Si changed from an instructor to a cheap brother, the title changed, but it didn't change the impression of Song Si in Tang Fan's mind. What ripples can an elder say to you? "I haven't seen you for a long time, I miss you so much"? Tang Fan just thought Song Si was joking. Although Tang Fan no longer deliberately avoided Song Si, he didn't get too close to him. Except for occasionally meeting and saying hello. Then, there was nothing else. And there were not many such greetings. Because, Miss Tang Fan was surprised to find potatoes, a food that is popular in both the Earth era and the Interstellar era, on this not-so-big land. If there is one, there will be two, and if there are two, there will be three. For a time, finding potatoes became the interest of everyone on post-Saturn. But this did not include Tang Fan. Tang Fan's interest was not in finding potatoes, but in turning these potatoes into various dishes. Fried potato shreds, baked potatoes, mashed potatoes, potato cakes, are just basic operations. Potato chips, candied potatoes, potato balls, are just a slight upgrade. Tang Fan has mastered 100 ways to eat potatoes, and continues to innovate tirelessly, striving to not get tired of eating for 100 years. Looking at the little girl who was obsessed with cooking and couldn't extricate herself, and didn't take herself to heart at all, Major General Song Si Song had to smile bitterly. Since the heart is bitter, it's time to eat something sweet. Therefore, Major General Song Si Song particularly appreciated the candied potato. Although Miss Tang Fan didn't quite understand why a grown man was so obsessed with sweets, Tang Fan still satisfied Song Si's insignificant little habit when there was plenty of sugar. Eating the candied potatoes, Song Si's depression caused by the inexplicable little thoughts in his heart was finally relieved a little. There is no reason for feelings. He likes Tang Fan, but Tang Fan has no obligation to like him. His efforts do not mean that Tang Fan must give him back. What's more, Tang Fan has been busy all the time. When she was young, she was busy surviving. When she was older, she was busy with her studies. When she was older, she was busy starting a company to make money. Tang Fan, who has always been pragmatic, has never thought about falling in love. After all, love is not a necessity in life, and it doesn't affect life whether there is love or not. I have to say, Major General Song Si, the truth. Miss Tang Fan is really so stupid. In Miss Tang Fan's eyes, mechas are not fun, or the food is not delicious enough, so why bother to fall in love? Think about her cheap mother, Comrade Tang Man. And then think about Zhao Jingshu, who has been guarding the Blue Sea Mecha Academy for more than 10 years. Tang Fan not only has no intention of falling in love, but also has some rejection of the matter of falling in love. In her heart, falling in love is equivalent to wasting money and time. Even, there is a worry about life. Chapter 410, Mouth. The difficulty of wanting to fall in love with Tang Fan is no less than finding a way back to the alliance. As a smart person, Song Si should have chosen one of the two. But although Major General Song Si wanted both, seeing that Tang Fan was not smart, he could only put the matter of feelings aside for a while. Major General Song Si would never admit that he was bribed by the candied potatoes. He made the choice after weighing the priorities and thinking carefully. After Tang Fan focused on cooking, Song Si also focused his attention on his opponent. As smart as Song Si is, both his observation and analytical abilities are first class. Even if Emil Field only opened a video device and the angle was confusing, because they were moving too slowly, Song Si and Glasses could still find some clues from the lens. Of course, when Emil Field and others need help, drones will be sent out with medicines for reinforcement. After repelling the third wave of identical mutants, Song Si and Glasses seemed to have realized something. After looking at each other, they sent out the drone, passing Emil Field and others, and headed towards the target planet. When they saw the drone, Emil Field and others were surprised and looked around for traces of mutants. Unfortunately, apart from the dark sky and the eternal nebula, they didn't find a single hair. After confirming that there was nothing around, Emil Field and others looked at the drone and even the video equipment with a little subtlety. A few minutes after the drone passed them, the 4 video equipments were turned on again, covering every corner of the surrounding area. Through Emil Field and others' video equipment, Song Si and Glasses clearly saw the enchanting trajectory of the drone. Compared with the video equipment on the drone, it was clearer and more stable. Of course, you can also clearly and stably see Emil Field's cowardly look. For this, Song Si regretted it a little. If he had known that a drone could scare this guy so much and make him obedient, why would he have waited so long? However, it's not too late to know now. Is it an unexpected surprise? Just as Song Si was thinking about the next plan to scare Emil Field, the drone had slowly arrived above the target planet. Through the infrared scanner carried by the drone, Song Si and Glasses clearly saw that there were only 5 life forms with human characteristics on this huge planet. Song Si and Glasses looked at each other and smiled. I thought it was a battle of fewer against more, but I didn't expect it to turn out like this. In this case, I'm not afraid anymore. Song Si patted Glasses, who was talking nonsense, and said unhappily, war is a matter of time, place and people. We only have an advantage in numbers, which doesn't mean anything. It is a taboo for military strategists to underestimate the enemy before the war. You give it to me, keep it back. Glasses shrank his neck and laughed dryly. I don't need it. Song Si glanced at him and didn't say anything, but the suspicion in his eyes said it all. Song Tong, who was watching the show while chewing a nutritional supplement, patted Yan Jing's shoulder sympathetically and said earnestly, too much talk leads to mistakes, young man. The onlookers couldn't help but cast sympathetic eyes on Yan Jing. Faced with this scene, Yan Jing wanted to slap himself twice. Why are you so rude? Chapter 411 Silence. In order to make up for his mistakes and regain the trust of Major General Song Si, the talkative Glasses reluctantly handed over the control of the drone to Song Si. Looking at the slightly raised corners of Song Si's mouth, Glasses suddenly had a little doubt. Could it be a trap for him? It should be, not. After all, after the drone was handed over to Song Si did not move it, and it kept hovering above the target. But when Field and others defeated the seventh wave of mutant creatures and arrived at the target location, Glasses' mood changed unexpectedly. Through the 4 video recording devices that were turned on at the same time, he clearly saw the appearance of the target planet. There were white clouds floating in the blue sky, and the blue was not vast. The grass danced its soft waste lightly, and the trees of different heights stood upright. No matter how you look at it, it is a beautiful, pastoral picture. Because of this, the silence in the video recording device seemed particularly abrupt, making people feel cold in their hearts. Glasses drooled and said with a fluke, could it be that there is something wrong with the video equipment? Song Si did not speak, but zoomed in the lens facing Field infinitely. The terrified eyes and the clear, crystal clear water drops hanging on his head silently broke Glasses' last fantasy. There was no problem with the video equipment. Field, who was far away in the target area, felt a fear more deeply than them. Song Si sounded the alarm immediately. Within 3 minutes, all the people in Post Saturn gathered around him and turned their attention to the screen at the same time. Field's sweat drops that kept falling in fear silently told them that this was not a still picture. And the magic of his fear also indirectly showed that there was nothing wrong with the radio system. That can only mean that this planet, which looks very habitable but has fallen into dead silence, has no other living creatures except the 5 life forms with human characteristics, and Field and his group. Ms. Tao Kingxi's mind was turning like a revolving lantern. She couldn't help but take 2 steps forward and murmured, whether it is the Earth era or the interstellar era, there are many species with stronger survival ability than humans. There are no other animals, but there are humans. This situation is unscientific. Everyone looked at each other and finally found the reason for their discomfort. Song Si narrowed his eyes and said, then what do you think is a more reasonable explanation? Ms. Tao Kingxi touched her chin, pondered for a moment, and slowly said, the research involving humanitarian issues prohibited by the Alliance not only includes biological cloning and genetic recombination, but also mechanical biology, and other projects. When Song Si heard this, he couldn't help but breathe quickly and took a breath. You mean, those 5 life forms with human characteristics are not necessarily human? Tao Kingxi poked his back teeth and sneered, I have never hesitated to speculate Field with the greatest malice. Since he can use mutant organisms to make medicine, he has achieved the purpose of genetic recombination. Then, biological cloning, mechanical organisms, what is impossible? What's more, he has the convenient conditions. Tao Kingxi glanced at the planet made of black iron in the distance. Song Si narrowed his eyes and did not refute. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 412 Not a Human. The last bit of luck disappeared in Song Si's silence. Everyone knew that they would have a tough battle next. And the opponent was most likely, not a human. Although the psychological acceptance would be a little higher, the difficulty of operation should increase several times. Even they were scared. They couldn't even beat the mutants. Field, who needed potion support. The picture was too beautiful, and they didn't dare to look at it. Although Field's character was not very good, he could be considered a person on the same boat. It was obviously impossible for the upright and kind expeditionary forces to abandon them. The most important thing was that if their rescue was not timely, Field, who had always been eating a sharp meal and doing things on the side, would most likely abandon the original plan and run away. This picture was more beautiful than the previous one, and it was even more unbearable to look at. Therefore, whether to save or not, and how to save, became the number one problem facing everyone. Songsi's eyes slowly slid over everyone, and finally landed on Miss Tao Qingxi. Tao Qingxi sighed and took out the last 2 barrels of potions without hesitation. That's all. Songsi looked at the few potions, gritted his teeth, and pushed one of the barrels in the direction of Tang Fan. Tang Fan sighed, took out the drone from the space buckle, tied the potion and instructions for use, and headed straight for the target as the first batch of aid. With the guidance of the drone with the glasses, Tang Fan operated his drone to ride the wind and waves and flew straight towards Field. Looking at the drone that circled 3 times in front of him, Field could only reluctantly give up his plan to escape, and gritted his teeth to take down the potion and instructions for use on it. As Jim Field's biological son, even if Field did not have a talent for pharmacy, he had no problem reading a potion manual. As for the other meanings hidden in the manual, after careful speculation, Field could actually analyze it. Then, Field's hand trembled visibly. Although the amplitude was not large, it did not escape Songsi and Tang Fan's eyes. Did this guy overinterpret something? Although he didn't want to admit it, Songsi actually felt a little relieved in his heart. As long as Field didn't run away with his men, their chances of winning could be increased by at least 30%. Songsi was thinking about it, and Tang Fan was not idle either. She narrowed her eyes, pulled Tao Qingxi's sleeve, and whispered, "Do you think there is anything in that manual that can impress Field?" Tao Qingxi touched his chin, pondered for a moment, and said, "Jim Field has 3 wives, all of whom died in childbirth." It was obviously a completely unrelated sentence, but it successfully attracted Songsi's attention. After looking at Tang Fan, Tao Qingxi and Field on the screen, Major General Songsi sighed. Song Tong, who was standing next to him, followed Songsi's gaze and looked around, and then he suddenly realized it. So, he is also. As soon as Song Tong started to speak, his mouth was tightly covered by Major General Songsi. Looking at the unhappy expressions of Tang Fan and Miss Tao Qingxi, Song Tong finally realized his mistake, smiled embarrassedly, and swallowed the words that were on the tip of his tongue. Chapter 413 Bubble Gun. Although Song Tong did not finish his words, the people present clearly understood what Song Tong meant. For a moment, everyone looked at Tang Fan and Miss Tao Qingxi with a little more sympathy and pity. But neither Tang Fan nor Miss Tao Qingxi needed the sympathy and pity of others. They both had the ability to make their bodies and minds better and stronger. It was precisely because of this understanding that Songsi moved the hand on Song Tong's mouth down, and the iron palm was like a pliers, pinching it hard. Although Song Tong's physical strength was slightly better than Tao Qingxi, it was only a little better. Songsi hit him so hard that Song Tong almost screamed in pain. But after seeing the expressions of Tang Fan and Tao Qingxi, he held back. What is disaster comes from the mouth, Song Tong finally understood today. In order to make up for his mistake, Song Tong ignored the pain in his shoulder and quickly changed the subject. "Look, what is Field holding in his hand?" Song Tong's earth-shattering words successfully attracted everyone's attention. It's not that Song Tong's method of changing the subject is so superb, but the thing in Field's hand is too unexpected. Have you ever seen an adult carrying a toy on a mission? Field is the first person everyone has seen. Now, in front of us. In today's extremely severe war situation, Mr. Field, who is fighting on the front line, is fiddling with a bubble gun. Yes, you read it right. In Field's hand, it is the most loved by 3-year-old children in the Earth era, used to make bubbles, children's toys. Even the knowledgeable Major General Songsi was stunned for several seconds when he saw this absurd scene in front of him, not to mention other people. Thanks to Field, Song Tong changed the subject so thoroughly for the first time. In everyone's eyes and hearts, there is nothing else except the bubble gun. Although the bubble gun in Field's hand is a bit childish, it complements the special potion made by Miss Tao Qingxi. When the first batch of mutant creatures attacked, this bubble gun played an extremely powerful role. It is efficient, environmentally friendly, and energy-saving, and it is so powerful that Miss Tao Qingxi is jealous. Seeing Miss Tao Qingxi's envious look, Tang Fan sighed and gave her and Major General Songsi one each. But when Miss Tao Qingxi was holding the bubble gun and reminiscing about her childhood, Major General Songsi was very conflicted. Take it. This thing is obviously not in line with his temperament. Don't take it. This is the first gift Tang Fan gave him. What if Tang Fan misunderstood and never gave him a gift again in the future? Song Si was so conflicted that his handsome face almost wrinkled into a chrysanthemum. Song Tong, who was watching the show on the side, touched his already bruised shoulder and silently reached out to the bubble gun. Just when his fingertips were about to reach the bubble gun, a bronze hand, with lightning speed, took the lead and took the bubble gun into his arms. What does it mean that there is no one to cultivate the thin land, but people will fight for it after it is cultivated? Song Tuong finally understood it all today. Facing Song Tuong's teasing gaze, the upright Major General Song Si blushed. Fortunately, his skin was a healthy bronze color, so it was not too obvious. If you didn't look closely, you might not be able to see it. Chapter 414 Making Trouble. Song Tong, who was making trouble nearby, saw it clearly and was so scared that his eyes almost fell out. This shy girl, was it Song Si, the young master she had seen since she was a child? In an instant, something collapsed in Song Tong's heart. If conditions allowed, she would definitely record this scene to let Ms. Yao know that her smelly boy also had a little princess in his heart. Unfortunately, the speed of the body could not keep up with the brain. Before Song Tong pulled out the recording equipment, accompanied by the sound of a bubble gun being triggered, the shy blush quickly retreated from Song Si's face, replaced by the number one expression he usually had on his face. The speed was so fast that Song Tong couldn't help but suspect that she was dazzled. Song Si didn't have time to pay attention to these. He focused all his attention on the screen. To be precise, he focused all his attention on Emil Field, who was fighting against the enemy on the screen. The slightly childish and exaggerated bubble gun was firmly controlled by Emil Field. With the sound of the trigger being pulled, a string of colorful bubbles floated in the wind and slowly landed on the mutants not far away. This is a beautiful picture. If we ignore the mutants and their roars after touching the bubbles, it would be even more perfect. Under the indiscriminate attack of the bubbles, the enemy's combat effectiveness dropped rapidly, and Emil Field's men successfully harvested a wave of leaks. Emil Field and his team were unstoppable, but Song Si's expression did not look any better. Even Song Tong, who was obsessed with gossip, turned his attention to the screen when he saw a bald patch of grass in front of Emil Field. It seems that the mutant's property of eating everything has not changed. Song Si's hand brushed across the brown land in the deep and light green on the screen, and sneered, "Only people have changed. The enemy has hit the doorstep, but only knows to release the people of the mutants." Song Tong sighed and said with a smile, "Should I remind Emil Field?" Song Si shook his head slightly. "No hurry, the big barrel of medicine he sent to Emil Field would keep him going for 3 or 5 rounds. Even if the medicine ran out, Emil Field was not dead, he could still run. Even if he couldn't run, how could a business elite who was in the top 10 of the Alliance's rich list not have something to save his life? Even if all these were useless, wouldn't Emil Field still have one last thing to rely on? He was Jim Field's blood. People say that even a tiger won't eat its own cubs. No matter how vicious Jim Field was, he wouldn't kill his own son. Tao Kingxi seemed to have guessed Song Si's thoughts and frowned. "Please don't hesitate to speculate Jim Field with the greatest malice. In the mind of this selfish man, there is no one else except himself. What's more, we have no evidence to prove that he is still alive." Song Si glanced at her and nodded. "You make a lot of sense. How about this? Xia Audio leads a team to the target planet and follows Emil Field and others from a distance. Do not take action unless necessary." Xia Audio saluted straight, shouted yes, then looked at Song Tong deeply and left with his men. Major General Song Si saw it clearly. He raised his eyebrows, but said nothing. Chapter 415 Change. Just a few minutes after Xia Audio left Saturn, Emil Field and his team encountered the second wave of mutant creatures. This intensive frequency made Emil Field and Song Si frown at the same time on and off the screen. Emil Field, who had always been passive in the battle, finally took an active approach. After urging his men to eliminate the second wave of mutant creatures, he advanced at the fastest speed. But less than 3 kilometers later, the third wave of mutant creatures arrived as expected. Looking at the bubble gun with only 1/3 of the potion left, Emil Field. It's amazing. But what can he do? Of course. Fight hard. After handing over 1/3 of the potion, and after another wave of fierce fighting, Emil Field, who was at the end of his rope, finally found his target. It was a 3-story house, and no matter from which angle you look at it, it perfectly overlaps with the one on the experimental star. Field and his team looked at the gray building, and their expression management was more or less a little problematic. This building, like a twin, reminded them of what happened on the experimental star. Those unpleasant experiences made them stare with surprise. I don't know who first proposed to destroy this thing. This inhumane suggestion was actually passed unanimously. Before the fourth wave of mutants appeared, Field personally set up the light energy cannon, aimed at the building in front of him, and pulled the trigger. Field's accuracy was not very good, and he had never hit the bullseye with a directional target. This time was no exception. He originally wanted to hit the center of the building, but he just hit a corner in the northwest direction. Fortunately, the coverage of the light energy cannon was large enough and the strike force was strong enough, so Field actually achieved his goal. The gray, unpleasant building actually collapsed under everyone's eyes. At the same time, Song-si and Tang Fan, who were always paying attention to Field's every move, uttered two words at the same time, "Not good." Song-si took out the potion that had just been put into the space and stuffed it into Tang Fan's hand, allowing her to command a drone to fly towards the target again. At first, no one could understand the two's magical operation. But when the dust that covered the sky and the sun gradually dissipated, the basement under the broken walls slowly appeared in front of everyone, and everyone couldn't help but shudder. What surprised them was not the huge power of the light energy cannon, but the basement with outdoors and windows. Even through the screen, these expedition officers and soldiers who had seen the tragic situation of the border planet could see at a glance that the thing that kept squirming at the dark hole was the birthplace of mutant creatures, the insect nest. Alpha Star Field, Linksu Star Field, Gamma Star Field. Every member of the expeditionary force knew the power of the insect nest. It was precisely because of this that even though they knew that the scenes in front of them were likely to be a huge trap. But when they saw the mutants crawling out of the dark hole, Zaya Adeo still stepped forward and stood next to Field. He could only move forward, not backward. With Zaya Adeo controlling the situation, the fourth wave of mutants was quickly contained. Then, it was a long process of fighting. When the weapon in Zaya Adeo's hand blocked the seventh wave of mutant creatures, Miss Tang Fan's drone finally came to him with a potion. Chapter 416 First Meeting. When the potion was slowly poured into the basement, and when the insect nest was destroyed bit by Zaya Adeo and others, Field breathed a sigh of relief, and then realized what he had done. In the absence of potions, he actually obeyed the command of a small colonel of the expeditionary army and confronted 3 waves of mutant creatures head-on. This was something he never dared to think about. However, he really did it, cherishing his life very much. He threw himself on the grass, watching Zaya Adeo and others busy in and out, handling the follow-up matters in an orderly manner, thinking about the several rescues that were never late. Field's heart was mixed with mixed feelings. From deceiving him to be the vanguard, to every timely assistance, and even the appearance of Zaya Adeo. Song-si grasped the timing just right. He always thought that Song-si just had a good father. The butt determines the head. If he was put in Song-si's position, he would not do worse than Song-si. But after experiencing such a hearty battle, Field realized that many things that seem simple are not necessarily the same when done. He lost. Lost miserably. Lost sincerely. Field smiled bitterly, then took the video equipment, said something completely unrelated to the camera. Some things, although they are under your name, do not mean that they belong to you completely. Field's words came out of nowhere, but Song-si and Tang Fan understood them immediately. For example, the Cheyenne Star region. For example, the Black Skull Star Pirates. Although the answers were different, the meanings were not far apart. With these words, Tang Fan's thoughts returned to the year when he met the Black Skull Star Pirates. The absurd scenes appeared vividly in his mind, as if they happened yesterday. Just by digging around, she actually found several strange points. She was about to dig them out to discuss with another party involved, Major General Song-si, but was interrupted by a strange sound. With the sound of the electric current, the blue sky on the screen was filled with snowflakes. Everyone had only one thought in their mind: something happened to Field. Major General Song-si's face became serious, and he said sternly, "Song Tong will take all the logistics personnel and Miss Tao Kingxi to stay behind. All combatants in Tang Fan, follow me to the target location and prepare for rescue." "Yes," the crisp voice suddenly resounded through the sky, and the scene was very tense for a while. Just when the 10 soldiers, plus Tang Fan, boarded the mecha, the harsh sound of electricity suddenly disappeared. Songsi's heart tightened, and he couldn't help turning his head. On the small screen, the snowflakes in the southeast corner had been replaced by a black. Fortunately, the other three places had lit up at the right time. All the people sent to the front line appeared in the camera. Xiaodao stood at the front with his sword across his body. Emil Field, who always paid attention to his personal image, was now slumped in the middle with his hair disheveled, still in shock. At his feet was a video recording device that had already fallen apart. Following his line of sight, a man with a lion's body, a strong physique, and sharp claws appeared in front of everyone. He was on all fours, scratching the ground with his front claws, and making a low roar. No need to guess, this is definitely the murderer who destroyed the video equipment. Chapter 417 Routine. Songsi stopped abruptly, took out the drone remote control snatched from glasses, and controlled the drone with video equipment, rushing to the battlefield at the fastest speed. The bird's eye view and the horizontal view are obviously different. In addition to the one facing the three video equipment, Songsi also saw other opponents approaching Xiaodao and others one after another. 1, 2, 3. Songsi counted silently. 7 enemies appeared in Songsi's sight one after another. Although their attack power was still unknown, he finally breathed a sigh of relief when he saw them all staying on the ground obediently. The drone slowly descended, turned 3 times in front of Xiaodao, and finally landed on his shoulder obediently. Xiaodao quickly signaled the monkey next to him to dock with the drone. Soon, the picture taken by the drone was transmitted to the monkey's optical brain. Being able to become Songsi's personal soldier, the monkey naturally has his own strengths. Although his analytical ability is not as good as glasses, the monkey can still quickly analyze the current situation through the information provided by the drone. Although the distance between post-Saturn and here is much closer than the experimental star, it is still impossible to save a nearby fire. Seeing the 7 genetically modified opponents approaching step by step, both Monkey and Xiaodao knew that delaying would only lead to encirclement, and they had to fight quickly. However, knowing is one thing, and taking actual action is another. After all, no one can guarantee that the comrades who just fought against the mutant creatures together will raise their butcher knives against them at this critical moment, or after they have eliminated the opponents. Xiaodao poked his back teeth and gestured to Monkey. Monkey immediately stepped back and exited the defense circle, while Xiaodao quickly took a half step to the right and blocked the gap next to him. The two people's small movements successfully attracted everyone's attention. Especially Emil Field. He was so nervous that his hair stood up and his toes dug into the ground, like a cat with its fur standing up. Monkey looked at him so nervous that he could only stop 1 meter away, not knowing whether to laugh or cry, and just stretched out his arm to signal the other party to look at his optical brain interface. Although his military quality was not as good as Songsi, Emil Field could become the leading energy businessman in the alliance, so he was definitely not stupid. After a cursory glance, Emil Field came to his senses and said directly, "Tell me your plan first." The monkey swiped in the middle of the screen and said with a smile, "You have more people, so you will suffer a little." "You 4, we 3. Emil Field shook his head quickly. "Although we have a lot of people, most of us are not combatants and are not as professional as you. It's better for you to suffer a little, you 4, we 3. When the monkey heard this, he nodded reluctantly. "Although this is not very reasonable, the situation is urgent, so let's suffer a loss." Although he said so, Emil Field felt that something was wrong. But the opponent was right in front of him. Emil Field didn't have time to think about it, and turned around to study the 3 opponents that the monkey had assigned to them. The monkey, who had just looked regretful, turned around and ran to his teammates, and immediately smiled widely. Accompanied by his mission accomplished gesture, not to mention how proud he was. Although his intelligence analysis is not as good as that of glasses, when it comes to acting, Monkey is really not afraid of anyone. The best actor of the Expeditionary Army, do you know him? Chapter 418. The reason why the monkey went back to trick Emil Field was not because they expected them to eliminate the 3 opponents, but to attract the attention of Emil Field and his opponents. Seeing that Emil Field was hooked, Xiaodao and his group breathed a sigh of relief. They could finally concentrate on dealing with a guy with a lion head and a human body in front of them. Although this guy does not have a strong exoskeleton like the mutant creatures, and cannot fly, he has a ground-running speed that mutant creatures do not have. There are still potions for mutant creatures. For these genetically modified opponents, Xiaodao and his group can only resist. One person was left to keep an eye on Field and others, and the others actively participated in dealing with this someone with a lion face and a human body. There's gain and loss. After gaining a strong physical fitness, the someone with the lion face and a human body must have lost something. Xiao speculated that it is very likely that it lost the ability to think that most people have. In order to verify whether his guess is correct, Xiao decided to give it a try first. Using gestures instead of words, Xiao determined the action plan, took a deep breath, took the Tang that Tang Fan had just repaired for him, and smiled evilly at the someone with the lion face and human body. The next second, the more than 1 meter long Tang aimed at the sharp claws and slashed over. Xiao's sudden attack successfully angered the opponent. Its sharp claws barely brushed past the Tang and attacked Xiao's honest face. Although Xiao's face was not good looking, he could still coax his target, and there was no reason for him to be buried in the hands of this inhuman thing. Seeing that the claws were about to reach Xiao, he did not retreat but advanced, and slid under the opponent's body with a step. The Tang was across him, and it came into close contact with the opponent's stomach, leaving a blood mark. A muffled sound came from the throat of the someone with the lion face and human body, and blood was like a pillar, all sprinkled on Xiao. Even so, the thing did not fall down. Instead, it turned around and rushed towards Xiao with great ferocity. A good man never suffers a loss. Xiao rolled over in a panic, wiped the blood off his face, and shouted, "Monkey sight," and pulled the trigger of the light energy gun reluctantly. A beam of white light shot out from behind Xiao and went straight to the opponent's bloody wound. The damage caused by a hot weapon like a light energy gun is naturally not comparable to that of a cold weapon like a Tang sword. The opponent that Tang failed to take away was now lying quietly on the ground, deader than dead. A fist-sized black hole went from the chest to the back, with a smell of burning. Where has a young man like Field ever seen such a scene? He only took a look and couldn't help vomiting. Looking at Field's expression, Major General Song Si couldn't help but curl his lips and utter 2 words, "Weakling." You know, Tang Fan, a little girl, didn't have such a big reaction when she saw the corpse of a mutant creature when she first went to the battlefield, okay? Field, a man. Yes. Miss Tang Fan has become the standard for Major General Song Si to evaluate a person. In addition to professional skills, anyone who can't compare with Miss Tang Fan is a weakling. As a benchmark, Miss Tang Fan was also very dissatisfied with Field's performance. So, the little sister asked a question from the bottom of her heart. With this kind of character, how did he come up with the basement? Tang Fan's question directly stumped everyone. Ms. Tao Kingxi touched her nose and laughed dryly. I'm afraid you have to ask him himself. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 419 Blame Me. It was impossible to ask Field. Because it was useless to ask. Field would never give them an answer. Even the fact that he was disgusted by the corpse and vomited, this guy didn't want to, and wouldn't admit it. Even though Tang Fan and Song Si had evidence in their hands. However, although Field was stubborn, his IQ was still online. He was not only used to vomiting, but also gained a little bit of insight from the battle between Xiao and others. After Xiao and others surrounded and suppressed 2 more opponents, they finally stumbled and sent an opponent with a cow body and a human face and horns to the King of Hell. Just when Field and others were celebrating, Major General Song Si, who had been paying attention to the screen, had his pupils dilated and looked shocked. It was not that he was so unconfident in the strength of Field and others, but that he actually felt a familiar taste in Field's opponent. Silently directing the drone to approach the body that was shot and received by Field and others with a light energy gun, he took a close-up of the face and compared it with all the pictures in his optical brain, but there was no way to match it. Song Si couldn't accept this result and couldn't help frowning. Song Tuang looked at his expression, sighed, walked up, patted his shoulder, and said, "Let me try it." Song Si sent the photo to Song Tuang doubtfully. Unexpectedly, Song Tuang really turned out the information of this person from his optical brain. This guy is not Song Si's relative, not his friend, and not even his acquaintance, but he does have a little intersection with Song Si. They once boarded the same merchant ship. Moreover, it was the merchant ship where Song Si first met the Black Skull Star pirates. This is definitely not a coincidence. Thinking about the other people on this starship who are more familiar and intimate with Song Si, Song Tong couldn't help but close his eyes, not knowing whether to tell him this result. Before Song Tong could make a decision, Song Si, who had already seen some clues, had already grabbed her arm and put the laptop under his eyes. She was frightened, of course. But more of it was anger. Anger towards Jim Field and others. Running his fingers over the list of missing persons with names and photos, looking at the strange yet familiar faces, Song Si's mood became heavier and heavier. The surging memories almost drowned him. After a long time, his low and hoarse voice was heard. "Don't tell others." Song Si paused, and then said, "Bury him as lavishly as possible." Although Song Si didn't say it clearly, Song Tong still understood what he meant and nodded heavily. Although they didn't know what the two people were talking about, they were not fools. They could clearly see that Song Si was in a bad mood. Even though his gossiping heart was burning and he was so uncomfortable, he could only hold it back. However, this reserve only lasted until Major General Song Si turned around. As soon as Song Si focused on the screen, Tang Fan, who knew that he would not be on a mission for a while, hooked Song Tong's neck and dragged her away. After comparing the strength of both sides, Song Tong followed Tang Fan's steps obediently and handed over the photos sent by Song Si and the long list in her light brain. With these two things in front of her, what else did Tang Fan not understand? She patted Song Tong's shoulder and said earnestly, "Send this thing to Song Si quickly, and delete it." Song Tong was shocked. "This matter is my fault." Chapter 420, Man's Tears. Although being dominated by a little girl made people feel uncomfortable, Song Tong, who had no better way, could only follow Tang Fan's advice. After sending the list to Song Si, he completely deleted it and put on an innocent face that said he knew nothing. Although everyone knew that this girl was pretending, they just couldn't do anything about her. But this matter was not something that would pass if Song Si and Tang Fan didn't talk about it. At least, it was not so easy for Song Si to get over it. Those who couldn't see their original appearance after genetic modification were fine. But for those whose appearance could be seen clearly, Song Si couldn't help but give them a close-up and compare them with the list in his hand. Tang Fan and Song Tong knew that this had become a heartache for Song Si. The whole alliance knew that the reason why Major General Song Si won the Zhuyi badge was because he encountered a wave of space pirates who didn't have much eyes when he went to the Expeditionary Force for professional internship and brought them to justice. Everyone also knew that in the 11.5 years after graduation, Song Si could eliminate a wave of space pirates every 6 months on average. More than 60% of the pirates in the prison of the capital star were sent by this man. He has the reputation of being the pirate nemesis. But only a few people know that he first encountered pirates much earlier than when he went to the Expeditionary Army for professional internship. As the family of the Marshal, while enjoying the glory, they must bear the corresponding pressure. Especially the family of Song Yuanqi, who is known as the Iron-Fisted Marshal, will bear more than ordinary people. Bribing medical staff to poison, assassination, disguised as pirates to kill. All the things that can be thought of and cannot be thought of, Song Yuanqi, Ms. Yao and Song Si have experienced it. However, Song Si, who has experienced all these, is still relatively lucky. At least, he survived. The 3 children that Song Yuanqi and Ms. Yao had before giving birth to Song Si were not so lucky. Especially their first child, who came to them for only more than a month and left them only 3 days after confirming the pregnancy. Song Yuanqi and Ms. Yao did not even have time to be happy, and they endured the sadness that they should not bear. It was a baby girl, which was Ms. Yao's lifelong regret and the main reason why Ms. Yao actively saw Tang Fan as her goddaughter. It was only because of this that when Ms. Yao was pregnant for the 4th time, Song Yuanqi was so nervous that she did not look for a pharmacist in the capital star at all. Instead, she personally sent Ms. Yao to the Blue Sea Star and handed her over to the care of the Lang Yuan couple. It was not until Song Si turned 6 years old and was photographed by an unscrupulous reporter that Song Yuanqi made the existence of Song Si public to the entire alliance. On the way that Ms. Yao took the 6-year-old Song Si back to the capital star, the young Song Si saw for the first time the nebula formed by the interweaving of countless fine planets in the vast starry sky. At the same time, he also saw a black dot that kept expanding in his lifelong enemy, the Black Skull Star Pirates. Even with a 50-man marshal's personal guard, That battle was extremely difficult. If Red Rose had not passed by, if Song Si had not made a decisive decision to reach an agreement with the Duke of Rose, Law Weir, Song Si himself did not know what would happen. Unfortunately, Law Weir was not strong enough back then, and could only take him and Ms. Yao away with difficulty. The remaining 50 soldiers, as well as other personnel on the starship. Song Si looked at the experimental star, and then at the 7 red dots that had been annihilated, with a tear in the corner of his eye. Men don't shed tears easily, but they just haven't reached the point of being sad. Chapter 421 Sin. Song Si, who was taken away by Law Weir, never forgot them. From that day on, these nearly 300 lives became a heavy burden on him. It was also from that time that Song Si realized what it meant to help oneself rather than others. While he worked hard to improve his own abilities, he secretly used his pocket money to arm Law Weir's Red Rose pirates. Strangely, no matter how hard Song Si and the people around him tried to find them, they could not find any trace of the missing people. For a long time after that, there was not even any news about the Black Skull pirates. Nearly 300 people on that starship were eventually declared dead. Marshal Song Yuanshi did his best to get the most pension for their families, and even paid out of his own pocket to subsidize many families in difficulty and raise a large number of their orphans. But the knot in Song Si's heart was not solved at all. Since the age of 6, Song Si has not rested for more than 6 hours a day. He is like a sponge, endlessly absorbing the knowledge he thinks is useful. From mecha driving to starship driving, from hand-to-hand combat to data analysis, from mecha construction to strategic command. Song Si's footsteps never stopped. When he finally got the permission from Song Yuanshi and Lan Yuan to go to the Expeditionary Army for internship, Song Si immediately used all the information resources in his hands, used himself as bait, and tried to hit the Black Skull Star Pirates. With the help of Lloyd Weir and Tang Gang, he succeeded. In just 11 years, Song Si encountered more than 20 Star Pirate attacks, wiped out wave after wave of Star Pirates, and sent a large number of heads to the capital Star Prison. But among so many heads, none of them was a familiar face to Song Si, and he didn't get any news related to the attack. If it weren't for the 300 victims' families, if it weren't for those children who lost their parents occasionally appearing in front of Song Si couldn't help but wonder if the attack was just a dream of his. Now, the nightmare was once again brought to Song Si, and Song Si, who thought he had grown up and matured, couldn't help but tremble with his hands. Tang Fan glanced at Song Si standing in front of the screen. He tried to open his eyes wide, like a drowning man, breathing hard and quickly. Tang Fan couldn't help but frown. It is said that a kind army cannot be commanded. But Song Si, as a major general, didn't seem to do that. Then these 300 people have become Song Si's inner demon. Even though they have been transformed into monsters that are neither human nor ghost by Jim Field, in Song Si's heart, they are old friends who have been with him day and night, and comrades who fought bloody battles to protect him. He even regarded their current appearance as a cross that he must bear. He even spent all his strength watching Xia Adeo and the others take action. How could he go to the battlefield and swing his knife at those innocent people? More than 30 years ago, Jim Field laid the groundwork just for this moment today. Jim Field's long-term vision and vicious mind far exceeded Tang Fan's imagination, making her shudder. She touched the goosebumps on her body, walked forward with her back teeth, blocked Song Si's sight with her slightly thinned body, and joked in a slightly exaggerated way, "The battle is almost over, why are you still staring at the screen? Are all major generals of the Alliance so idle? Or is it that the Song family motto is to do everything personally?" Chapter 422 Interlude. As Song Tong, who has been with Song Si for many years, it was a dereliction of duty for not noticing Song Si's abnormality at the first time. After Tang Fan's implicit reminder, if he still didn't react, he could only commit suicide to apologize. Therefore, Tang Fan just started, and Song Tong immediately took over. "You don't trust the soldiers you personally selected? Major General Song, you are too much." Miss Tao Kingxi also came to her senses and said with a smile, "Major General Song, you haven't rested for 17 hours in a row. From the perspective of a professional pharmacist, I suggest you take a proper rest." After saying that, Tao Kingxi also glanced at Song Si's clenched hands meaningfully. Through Tao Kingxi's eyes, Song Si felt a little wetness in his palms and the delayed pain. He silently put his hands in his pockets and secretly wiped off the little bit of red liquid. Then he walked to a chair not far away, lay down, and closed his eyes. Seeing Song-Si's resigned look, Tang Fan couldn't help but curl his lips, took out a blanket from the space buckle, and covered Song-Si. You have to look like you're sleeping when you sleep, right? Song-Si thought he couldn't fall asleep, but after 17 hours of fatigue and the faint fragrance of the girl on the blanket, he wanted to give 3 kind people a face, so he symbolically squinted his eyes, and he really fell asleep. And he slept for 6 hours. When he finally opened his eyes, he saw Tang Fan sitting in front of the screen, commanding with confidence. The girl's back was illuminated by the afterglow of the sunset, beautiful like a painting. Song-Si couldn't help but close his eyes and take a deep breath, savoring it for a moment, and then reluctantly lifted the blanket and stood up. But he couldn't stand up straight after sleeping in the chair for 6 hours. The back pain and leg cramps came to him one by one. Even a strong man like Major General Song-Si couldn't help but gasp. Tang Fan turned his head when he heard the voice, and saw Song-Si's charming standing posture and ugly grinning face. Miss Tang Fan, who was always reserved, couldn't help but burst out laughing. Song-Si was not feeling well. He stood there, frozen for 10 seconds. At this moment, Major General Song finally understood what it felt like to wish there was a crack in the ground. That's sour and refreshing. It was simply amazing. Fortunately, Miss Tang Fan, who laughed out loud, quickly realized her inappropriateness and held back her laughter. Looking at the little girl's shoulders that kept shrugging, Song-Si finally gave up resistance and sighed resignedly, "Laugh if you want to laugh. Don't hold it back and hurt yourself." Miss Tang Fan, who was pardoned, laughed out loud again. However, our Miss Tang Fan is also a kind person. Knowing that Major General Song-Si's face is very valuable, after laughing, she did not keep the corresponding video data, but instead gave the few physical recovery potions in her space to Major General Song-Si to maintain her face. Looking at the potion in Miss Tang Fan's hand, Major General Song-Si was at a loss of words. What he cared about was losing face in front of his subordinates. What he cared about was obviously losing face in front of her. But could he say it? Song-Si took a deep breath, took the potion with a drooping head, and threw himself back into the chair. The baby is unhappy. The baby is in a little mood. So, the blanket and so on, as an apology, will be confiscated. Yes. It was decided so happily. What is called pushing an inch. Major General Song-Si expressed it very well. Chapter 423 Chip. Song-Si secretly stuffed a blanket into his space buckle, reluctantly drank the physical recovery potion given by Tang Fan, and then slowly stood up from the chair. When Tang Fan was not paying attention, he secretly twisted his neck and stretched his waist. Knowing that Major General Song-Si was thin-skinned, Tang Fan could only pretend not to notice the crisp sounds behind him and stared at the screen in front of him. Even though there were only piled-up corpses and blazing flames on their bodies on the screen. But who made Major General Song-Si his nominal brother? Even if he didn't give him face, he had to give face to Marshal Song Yuanqi and Ms. Yao, right? But after watching, Tang Fan actually saw something. In order to confirm her judgment, she ignored the embarrassment just now, turned her head and grabbed Song-Si's hand. "Major General Song, come and take a look." Song-Si felt a current running from the clasped fingers directly to his whole body, making him numb all over. Like an ignorant child, Tang Fan dragged her in front of the screen. But when he saw what Tang Fan was holding with his other finger, the not-so-obvious metallic luster was like a bucket of cold water splashed on him. All the love between the young disappeared in that instant. Song-Si hurriedly pulled out the remote control of the drone from the space buckle and let it get closer to where Tang Fan was holding his finger. As the camera zoomed in little by little, a thin metal sheet as thin as a cicada's wing and with fine lines engraved on it appeared on the screen. As an excellent mecha foundry, Tang Fan not only saw at a glance that the metal sheet was made of red gold, but also inexplicably felt that the exquisite lines were extremely familiar. Her hands unconsciously followed the lines of the metal sheet, copying those familiar lines again and again, thinking about what they meant. When the drone had to move away due to the fire, turning the partial picture into the overall picture, when Tang Fan finally put his eyes on the location of the metal sheet, Tang Fan finally realized it. Generally speaking, if a dead object like a mecha or a starship wants to move, it must have a brain. People call the thing a chip. As a mecha foundry master who has learned starship casting, Tang Fan has made thousands of chips to control mechas and starships, but none of them are similar to this one. So, where does this familiar feeling come from? The beast-shaped mecha on the experimental star? Tang Fan disassembled that chip and looked at it. Although it is slightly different from the hand-controlled mecha, it is also inconsistent with the pattern on this chip. Tang Fan rubbed his temples and recalled his life over the past 30 years frame by frame from the beginning. Before the age of 15? No. Blue Sea Mecha Academy? No. Tang's Mecha? No. Alliance Military Academy? No. No, she remembered. Tang Fan pushed his back teeth, silently took out Bai Jiffin's game tablet from his space buckle and played with it for a while. On the screen of the game tablet in Tang Fan's hand, a beautiful silver line appeared in front of Tang Fan. Tang Fan took out a pen and slowly traced the direction of the silver line. A pattern exactly the same as the chip on the big screen appeared under Tang Fan's pen. Tang Fan couldn't help but laugh bitterly. No wonder it looked so familiar. So, she had already fallen into the trap? Chapter 424 Changes. Tang Fan raised a mocking smile, not knowing whether it was directed at himself or at Bai Jifeng and Shan Bailey. The scene on the screen was not interesting, and Tang Fan's reaction was indeed a bit exaggerated. As perceptive as Song Si was, he naturally did not miss Tang Fan's abnormality. Did you find anything? Song Si's voice was gentle, which he himself did not even notice. This voice successfully comforted Tang Fan and gave her the idea to confide in her. There was no one around, so Tang Fan organized her words and told her everything about how she met Bai Jifeng and Shan Bailey, how she came into contact with a mind-controlled mecha, and how she accidentally discovered that the chip of the mind-controlled mecha was exactly the same as the chip on the screen. Tang Fan did not hide or exaggerate, and was as calm as if she was telling a story that had nothing to do with her. But Song Si read a trace of pain after being betrayed in her eyes. He rubbed Tang Fan's head and said softly, "Didn't Bai Jifeng and Shan Bailey say that it was something that had been passed down in the Shan family for 5 generations? Perhaps, Jim Field and his gang plagiarized the Shan family's things. Besides, haven't we discovered it now? It's better for us to discover it now than to be kept in the dark, isn't it?" Although he knew that Song Si was talking nonsense in a serious manner, Tang Fan was still comforted by his words. "I hope so." Song Si patted her shoulder and said softly, "Since you have found the problem, find ways to solve it. At present, you are the only professional mecha foundry engineer here, so this important task is handed over to you. If you need any help, just call me." Tang Fan glanced at the dark blue under Song Si's eyes and curled his lips. "Just you? Watching surveillance, analyzing data, and making combat plans all day long. 17 hours are not enough. I can do small things like researching chips by myself. I appreciate your kindness." Although the little girl's words were not very pleasant, Song Si still felt a concern hidden in them. The Major General, who had always been mature for a young age, rarely gave up his expression management, showing a beautiful white tooth, and smiled like a 200-pound child. "Don't worry, I will take good care of myself and try to get more rest." After being said by Song Si, Miss Tang Fan, who was honest in her heart, became shy and ran away on the pretext of researching chips. Looking at Tang Fan's fleeing back, Song Si's mouth, which had just closed, opened as wide as it could once again. Even though Xiao Dao, who was dozing off, did not react after the drone flew around him 7 times, Song Si, the Major General, rarely lost his temper. However, did he secretly make a note in the little black book? Only Song Si himself knew. When the drone flew to the 8th circle, Xiao Dao finally felt the existence of this thing and hurriedly took it over. Seeing the drone gradually approaching and finally taking a close-up shot for several seconds, Xiao Dao, who was as smart as he was, immediately came to his senses. After fighting with mutant creatures, fighting with genetically modified people, and collecting corpses for all creatures, the pitiful Xiao Dao once again did an extra job that did not belong to his personal soldiers, whipping corpses. No. To be precise, it was to take the enemy's head. Fortunately, the quality of the chips was good. Even after being burned, all 7 chips were concentrated in Xiao Dao's hands. Looking at the 7 identical chips, Song Si couldn't help but sigh, and used the drone to convey the return signal to Xiao Dao and others. Chapter 425 Bad Taste. As expected of someone who had fought side by side, Song Si just controlled the drone and posed a few times in front of Xiao Dao, but Xiao Dao actually understood. He buried the ashes and returned to post Saturn with Emo Field. As soon as Xiao Dao stepped down from the mecha, Song Si immediately went to meet him. His relationship with Song Tong had just been exposed, but he was not made difficult by Song Si, but was warmly welcomed by Song Si. It was not because of his opinion of Song Tong, nor because of comradeship, nor because of Xiao Dao's personal charm. Looking at the palm of his hand that was about to reach his nose, Xiao Dao couldn't help but take a step back, smiled bitterly, and took out the 7 well-made chips from his space buckle. Song Si closed his palm with satisfaction and patted Xiao Dao's shoulder fiercely. One thing is one thing. The military merit is yours, and the account must be settled. Xiao Dao smiled bitterly and nodded. If you kidnap someone's sister, even if she is adopted, you will always have to suffer. He was prepared. Emelfield didn't care about the love-hate relationship of the Song family. What he cared about was the chip that Xiao Dao gave to Song Si. Emelfield gave her a look, and Kaisu Kameo beside him stood up, stepped forward and hooked Xiao Dao's neck, and said with a smile, "Brother Xiao Dao, what was that just now?" Xiao Dao glanced at Emelfield's number 1 lackey and smiled, "It's just a piece of metal. The Major General insisted that I bring it back. What can I do?" Looking at Xiao Dao's innocent and silly look, Kaisu Kameo deeply felt that the Oscar owed this drama queen in front of him a little golden man. Emelfield was even more furious. Damn it, what's the difference between saying it and not saying it? Kaisu Kameo took a deep breath, and then barely managed his expression, and continued to chat with a smile. Where did those metal pieces come from? Brother Xiao Dao should know, right? Xiao Dao raised his eyebrows after hearing this. I do know this. But are you sure you want to hear it? Looking at Xiao Dao's half-smiley eyes, Kaisu Kameo had a bad feeling in his heart. He turned his head and glanced at Emelfield. Although Emelfield was also nervous, he still gritted his teeth and nodded to Kaisu Kameo. Kaisu Kameo gritted his teeth, made up his mind, and secretly stuffed 2 physical recovery potions into his mouth. Brother Xiao Dao, don't keep me in suspense. Just say it directly. Xiao Dao took the physical recovery potion calmly and stuffed it into the space buckle. Then he patted Kaisu Kameo on the shoulder and pointed to his head. Not only Kaisu Kameo and Emelfield, but all the people around who were ready to listen to the gossip all had their pupils widened and looked at Xiao Dao in disbelief. Seeing everyone's surprised expressions, Xiao Dao smiled maliciously. You guessed it right. Those metal pieces were really taken out from the brains of those genetically modified people. The moment the guess was confirmed, the delicate young man, Emelfield, was the first to feel nauseous. Hameo Kaisu followed closely behind. Others also had various side effects. Xiao Dao smiled with satisfaction. Regarding Xiao Dao's bad taste of "if I don't live well, you won't live well either," his girlfriend Song Tong could only smile and shake her head. What else could she do? Antiemetic? That's impossible. At least not now. We can only pray that they will get used to vomiting after a while. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.